Hello and welcome. I'm Exelite and this is my channel. Today I'm going to tell you about the Connecticut River Valley Killer. Before we get started, let's do the housekeeping. If you would please give this video a thumbs up. If you are not subscribed, please do so. And if you do, please click that bell. All of the above helps my channel to be recommended for views. Alright, let's talk about this, shall we? The Connecticut River Valley Killer is a name given to an unidentified American serial killer believed to be responsible for a series of stabbing murders, mostly in and around Claremont, New Hampshire, and the Connecticut River Valley, primarily in the 1980s. So let me tell you a little bit about the background and the investigation. In the mid-1980s, 3 young women disappeared around Claremont. In 1985 and 1986, the skeletal remains of 2 of the women were recovered within 1,000 feet of each other in the wooded area in Kellyville, New Hampshire. The condition of the remains made the cause of death difficult to determine, but certain factors pointed to multiple stab wounds. Generally, this would be chips in the bones, etc. Between the recovery of the first and second bodies, a 36-year-old woman was stabbed to death in a frenzied attack inside her home in Saxtons River, Vermont. 10 days later, the remains of the third missing woman were found. An autopsy again revealed evidence of multiple stab wounds. At this point, investigators began examining prior homicides in the area and found 2 previous cases, one in 1978 and one in 1981, that further reinforced the presence of a serial killer. At the peak of this investigation, and after additional homicides and one non-fatal attack, investigators noted similarities in modus operandi, often used dump sites and specific wound patterns that linked many of the murders, suggesting a common perpetrator. On October 24, 1978, 27-year-old Kathy Milliken, left work and went to the Chandler Brook Wetland Preserve in New London, New Hampshire, where she was photographing birds. The next day, her body, with at least 29 stab wounds, was found only yards away from where she was last seen. On July 25, 1981, 37-year-old Mary Elizabeth Critchley, a student from the University of Vermont, disappeared near Interstate 91 at the Massachusetts-Vermont border, where she had been seen hitchhiking to Waterbury, Vermont. She was last seen by a friend who dropped her off near exit 13 of the Massachusetts Turnpike. On August 9th, her body was found in a wooded area off of Unity Stage Road in Unity, New Hampshire, about 8 miles from where she was last seen. Owing to the condition of the body, the medical examiner was unable to determine the cause of death. 17-year-old nurse's aide and high school student Bernice Courtemanche was last seen by her boyfriend's mother in Claremont on May 30th, 1984. She was thought to have set out to see her boyfriend in Newport by hitchhiking along New Hampshire Route 12. She never reached her destination and was subsequently reported missing. On April 19, 1986, a fisherman happened upon Courtemanche's remains near the Sugar River in Newport, New Hampshire. Forensic examination uncovered evidence of knife wounds to the chest and an injury to the head. Her throat had been slit. On July 22, 1984, 26-year-old Ellen Ruth Freed, supervising nurse at Valley Regional Hospital, made a late-night stop at around 2 a.m. to use a payphone at Leo's Market in Claremont. Freed spoke with her sister for approximately an hour when she suddenly remarked on a strange car she had observed driving back and forth in the vicinity, circling around the parking lot. She stepped away from the phone briefly to make sure that her car's engine would start and then returned. After speaking for a few minutes longer, Freed concluded the call. The next day, Freed failed to report to work, and her car was found abandoned on Jarvis Road, a few miles away from the market where she used the payphone. Freed's skeletal remains were found in an isolated wooded area near the banks of the Sugar River in Kellyville, 8 miles outside of Claremont, on September 19, 1985. Post-mortem examination revealed evidence of multiple stab wounds and probable S.A. On July 10, 1985, 27-year-old single mother Eva Marie Morse was seen hitchhiking near the border of Claremont and Charleston, New Hampshire, on Route 12. And this was the last time anyone would see Morse alive, and she too was reported missing. On April 25, 1986, Eva Marie had her remains found by loggers about 500 feet from where Critchley's body had been discovered in 1981. Post-mortem examination found evidence of knife wounds to Morse's chest and neck. On April 15th, in 1986, 36-year-old Linda Moore was doing yard work alongside her home in Saxons River, Vermont, Route 121, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon while her husband was at work. That evening, her husband returned home an hour after she was last seen to find his wife's dead body in the living room, bearing 25 knife wounds. The crime scene suggested a fierce struggle had taken place. There were no signs of forced entry or ransacking, but it was clear that she had fought for her life. Numerous witnesses reported having seen a slightly stocky, dark-haired man with a blue knapsack lingering near Moore's home on the day of her murder. The man was thought to be between 20 and 25 years old, clean-shaven, with a somewhat round face and wearing dark-rimmed glasses. The following year, a composite sketch was released. On January 10, 1987, 38-year-old nurse Barbara Agnew was returning from a skiing outing with friends in Stratton, Vermont, on Stratton Mountain. At around 10 p.m., she was last seen headed to her home in Norwich. That evening, a snowplow driver encountered her green BMW at a northbound I-90 rest stop in Hartford, Vermont. The door was cracked, and there was blood on the steering wheel and the back seat. Some of her blood-stained belongings were found in a nearby dumpster. On March 28, 1987, Agnew's body was found near an apple tree on Advent Hill Road in a wooded area in Heartland, Vermont. It was 12 miles from the rest area. She, too, had been stabbed repeatedly in the neck and chest. She had several defense wounds, as well as a disabling wound. She, too, had fought fiercely for her life. There was a heavy snowstorm in the area during the night of Agnew's disappearance, and she was a mere 10 miles from her home. Her reasons for pulling into the rest stop have puzzled investigators. Then, the killings had apparently stopped when, late in the evening on August 6, 1988, 22-year-old Jane Borowski, who was 7 months pregnant, was returning from a county fair in Keene, New Hampshire, when she stopped at a closed convenience store in West Swansea to purchase a soda from the vending machine. Borowski had returned to her car when she took notice of a Jeep Wagoneer parked next to her. Through her rearview mirror, Borowski then saw the driver of the vehicle walking around to the back of her vehicle. He then approached her open window and asked her if the payphone was working, at which time he immediately grabbed her and pulled her from the vehicle. Borowski struggled greatly, and the man accused her of beating up his girlfriend and asked her if she had Massachusetts plates on her car. Borowski responded that she had New Hampshire plates, but this did not deter her attacker, who proceeded to stab her 27 times before driving away and leaving her to die. Miraculously, Borowski managed to return to her car and drive on New Hampshire Route 32 toward a friend's house for help. As she neared the house, she noticed a vehicle driving in front of her and realized that it was her attacker's Jeep. Borowski finally reached her friend's home, at which the occupants immediately came to her aid. Her attacker apparently performed a U-turn and slowly passed by the house as Borowski was tended to before he sped away into the night. Borowski was treated at the hospital, where it was determined that the attack had resulted in a severed jugular vein, 2 collapsed lungs, a kidney laceration, and severed tendons in her knees and thumb. Fortunately, Borowski's baby had survived, although not without complications. Borowski's daughter would later be diagnosed with mild cerebral palsy. Borowski was able to provide authorities with a composite sketch and the first 3 characters of the attacker's license plate. However, the killings ceased following the Borowski attack, and the case became cold. Suspects in this case: Delbert Tallman. On May 20th, 1984, a 16-year-old Heidi Martin went for a jog in Heartland, Vermont on Martinsville Road. The next day, her body was found in a swampy area behind Heartland Elementary School. She had been sexually assaulted, essayed, and stabbed to death. The 21-year-old Delbert C. Tallman confessed to the crime and was tried. However, he later recanted his confession and was then acquitted. Nearly 3 years later, Agnew's body would be found approximately a mile from where Martin was discovered. Tallman was a resident in Bellows Falls, Springfield, and Windsor, Vermont, as well as Claremont, New Hampshire, the epicenter of most of the Connecticut River killings. He was convicted in 1996 on 2 counts of lewd and lascivious conduct with a child and was incarcerated at Lake County Prison in Florida for failure to comply with sex offender registration requirements. He was released from prison on October 6, 2010. Given the circumstances of Martin's murder and the dearth of information related to the arrest and trial of a suspect, some sources cite Martin's death as unsolved and part of these killings. There is, however, no evidence presently available to the public that Tallman was involved in any of the other cases. In October 1997, a 46-year-old Grafton, New Hampshire paraplegic named Gary Westover relayed to his uncle, retired Grafton County Sheriff's Deputy Howard Minnan, that he had a confession to make. He was a paraplegic and wheelchair-bound. Westover told Minnan that he was forced to participate in Barbara's murder. In 1987, according to his confession, 3 of his friends picked him up on the day of Barbara's murder for a night of partying. Allegedly, they loaded Westover and his wheelchair into their van and set out to Vermont, where they abducted, murdered, and dumped Agnew off a back road, the Connecticut River Valley Killer's final victim. They then took him back to his home. Westover provided the names of the 3 friends. Thereafter, Minnan shared Westover's information with his wife, daughter, and law enforcement. However, Minnan felt that authorities were not interested in his information. Westover died in March of 1988, and Minnan died in 2006. In August 2006, after deceased murderer and suspected serial killer Michael Andrew Nicolo was identified as a potential suspect, one of Westover's aunts wrote to Anne Agnew, sister of the victim, with the information originally given to Westover by Minnan. Agnew forwarded the letter to Carty, who suspected that Westover had been used as bait to get Barbara to pull over into the rest stop. She believes that Nicolo was one of the men named in Westover's confession. However, this has not been confirmed. She subsequently ran Nicolo's name by Westover's aunt, who stated that the name sounded familiar. Carty believes that the authorities are in possession of the names Westover provided to Minnan, and further speculated that Westover may have become acquainted with Nicolo at a local Virginia hospital, although none of this has been confirmed and the Connecticut River Valley killings remain unsolved. As always, if you have any information, even the slightest bit, if you have a friend of a friend, a grandfather, an uncle who has made strange comments, who lived in the area, something that was just off, even if you think it isn't a big deal, many, if not most, crimes of this nature are solved by the tiniest of details that they can sew together. Please call the police department. Thank you for coming to my channel, and good night.